Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, where we discuss all of the news in the world of baseball. My name is Ben Brown. Jeremiah is not in the studio today. He's feeling a little under the weather, so I will be riding solo on this episode number 46 here of the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. Baseball is still in the off-season, which is really disappointing. I'd love to be talking about some games, some breakout players, pitchers, hitters, guys going through some great streaks, some great slumps. But unfortunately, we do have a couple of months until we can seriously talk about baseball as far as games are concerned. But nevertheless, that's no excuse to not have the show and no excuse to have another action-packed show, which is what I have planned for you today. So last Wednesday, as Jeremiah and I mentioned on the show, it was the 2017 Hall of Fame voting day, the announcement day. So the Hall of Famers came out at 3 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Eastern. We were already out of the studio. So although it was a week ago, I still have to talk about who got in. I have the voting breakdown, the percentages for all these guys, if I think they got it right, if I think they got it wrong, as far as the voting is concerned. So we do have 3 new people that are inducted into Cooperstown. Jeff Bagwell, Tim Raines, and Ivan Pudge Rodriguez. So Jeff Bagwell got the highest percentage of votes on his 7th year on the ballot. He got 86.2% of the votes. That's 381 votes. So Jeff Bagwell is in the Hall of Fame. 449 career home runs, 1,529 RBIs, 200 stolen bases, 1,400 walks, and a career batting average of .297. Tim Raines, one of the best leadoff hitters of all time, probably in my eyes, top 2 or 3. I think Ricky Henderson's probably number 1, but Raines is up there as well. He got 86% of the vote in his 10th year on the ballot, 380 votes. He hit .294 in his career, 170 home runs, 980 RBIs. He had 808 steals. An absolutely fantastic player was Tim Raines. So he is now in the Hall of Fame. And then the third guy on his first year on the ballot, I was really, really surprised he just made it in. You, of course, need 75% of the vote to get in. And Pudge Rodriguez got 76% of the vote, 336 votes. Pudge hit 311 home runs. He had 1,332 RBIs, 127 stolen bases. He hit .296, not to mention all of his contributions behind the plate as a catcher. So Pudge Rodriguez on his first year on the ballot, I was really surprised to see him get in on his first year on the ballot. I thought that the baseball writers would have at least made him wait an additional year, at least until your second year, because a lot of the time, people don't like to put you in on your first year on the ballot because you're going in with some elite class. Like, you're going in with people like Babe Ruth, you know what I mean? People that are in on their first year on the ballot. Sometimes they make them wait, which honestly to me is not fair. Like, I get it. It makes sense, but to me it's not fair. If you're a Hall of Famer, you're a Hall of Famer. You shouldn't have to wait 5, 6, 7, Tim Raines' case, 10 years to get into the Hall of Fame. If you're a Hall of Famer, then you should be in right away. I kind of find it confusing how these voters kind of like change their minds. It's like Tim Raines finally gets in after 10 years, slowly working his way up the ballot and finally gets in after 10 years. So for the past 10 years, people have been changing their mind on Raines as far as, is he a Hall of Famer or not? I don't really understand that. How can you change your mind? His numbers aren't changing. He's not playing anymore. Your perception of Tim Raines or Jeff Bagwell, whomever, should not change over the time because their stats aren't going anywhere. It doesn't make any sense to me. But nevertheless, those are your 3 Hall of Fame inductees in baseball in 2017. So some of the other guys, a couple of them just missed out. I feel pretty bad for Trevor Hoffman. He got 74% of the votes, 327 votes overall. He needed literally 1 more percent. So Ivan Rodriguez got 336 votes. Trevor Hoffman got 327, so there's a difference of 9 votes there, which equated for 2%. So if he would have gotten another 4 or 5 votes, he would have gotten in as a Hall of Famer. And quite honestly, I honestly don't know how he's not a Hall of Famer. For me, he's a Hall of Famer. Look at his numbers. He's got a career ERA of 2.87. He's a closer. A guy who's got over 500 saves. 601 to be exact. So he's got 600 saves. How can you not have him in the Hall of Fame? It was his second year of eligibility. He missed out by 1%. Almost be certain when we're talking a year from now that he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He's going to get at least 1 more percent of the vote next year. Like I said, I'm not really sure how people can kind of change their minds on everything like that. But nevertheless, Trevor Hoffman just misses out. And then the other guy who really just missed out was Vladimir Guerrero. On his first year on the ballot, Vladdy got 71.7% of the vote for 317 votes. So he just missed out. Vlad's going to be a Hall of Famer. He hit 449 home runs, 1,496 RBIs. He stole 181 bases. His career batting average is .318, slugging percentage of .553. So, and not to mention how he did in the outfield. Great outfielder, had an absolute cannon. So when you look at his numbers compared to Jeff Bagwell, who just got into the Hall of Fame, he's got a higher batting average, .318 to .297. They have literally the exact same amount of home runs. Bagwell's got him on RBIs by about 34. Stolen bases by about 200. Walks, I don't really take into consideration because Vladimir Guerrero would literally hit anything outside of the strike zone. So Vladimir Guerrero is going to be a Hall of Famer. He just missed out on his first year. Probably next year, if not the year after that, Vladimir Guerrero is going to be in the Hall of Fame. You look at some of the other guys. There's a big drop-off between 5 and 6. 5 was Guerrero. Number 6 is Edgar Martinez, longtime player of the Mariners. They're going to actually retire his jersey number. The only other Mariner who has his jersey retired is Ken Griffey Jr. So good to see Edgar Martinez in there, but he only got 58.6% of the vote. In 7th and 8th is where we get into the steroid guys. Number 7, Roger Clemens, 54.1% of the vote. Number 8, Barry Bonds, 53.8% of the vote. So Clemens and Bonds are slowly working their way up the Hall of Fame voting. This was their 5th year of eligibility for both of them. Clemens got 1 more vote than Bonds did, 239 to 238. You need roughly 330 votes. So they're about 100 votes away, both of them, give or take a few votes. They're slowly working their way up. It seems like the writers are getting a little more okay with these steroid guys. Jeremiah and I talked about it on the show last week. I think they both need to be in the Hall of Fame. As far as them getting in or not, only time will tell. They're slowly working their way up the Hall of Fame voting percentage, but it's not really a drastic increase. They're still in the 50s. They still have a really long way to go because they have to get to 75. So they're still roughly 20-25 percentage votes away. So they still have a long way to go. But for me, there's no reason they should not be in the Hall of Fame. I would put them in. Number 9 is Mike Mussina in his 4th year on the ballot. He received 51.8% of the vote. And then it really drops off down from there. Number 10 is Curt Schilling at 45%. I mentioned last week I'd have Curt Schilling in the Hall of Fame in my eyes. 216 wins, a career ERA of 3.4, 11-2 in the postseason, highest strikeout to walk ratio in all of baseball, the moments, the World Series with the Diamondbacks, the bloody sock with the Red Sox. I would have him in the Hall of Fame, but he's going to have to wait even if he gets in. I don't think he'll ever get in. I think the media is not really happy with him. Some of his remarks he said over the past couple of years, not too happy with the people who are voting for these, the Baseball Writers Association of America. So I really don't think Curt Schilling will get in. He's only at 45% of the vote in his 5th year, so he's in the same year of ballot eligibility as far as Clemens and Bonds are concerned, and he's 8 to 9 percentage points off of them. So I really don't see any way he gets in. Number 11 is Lee Smith. Number 12 is Manny Ramirez. On his first year of the ballot, he got 23.8% of the vote. I don't think he'll ever get in, especially with a couple of his failed drug tests. Although his numbers are definitely there, there's no reason he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. But I think the same thing with Clemens and Bonds. Only time will tell, but I don't see how he gets in. I think Manny Ramirez is kind of below a couple of those other guys, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Number 13, Larry Walker. Number 14, Fred McGriff. Both those guys got 21.9 and 21.7 respectively. And then 15th was Jeff Kent. That's the cutoff. He got 16.7% of the vote. Jeff Kent's numbers are Hall of Fame worthy, but he was really just one of the most terrible teammates, according to reports. Not a nice guy. But, he got 15% of the vote at 16.7. So did they get it right? I knew, we talked about in the show, Bagwell and Raines are going to get in. Pudge Rodriguez was on the cusp. Trevor Hoffman was on the cusp. I would have put both those guys in. I think Hoffman's a Hall of Famer. I think Guerrero is going to get in. His numbers speak for themselves. And I would have put Clemens and Bonds and Schilling in. I think you can't exclude these steroid guys because of the time. Baseball knew they were doing this. Baseball was okay with it. They kind of turned the other way. They helped revitalize baseball. A lot of people were on steroids during that era. If everyone's on steroids, it's almost like no one's on steroids because they all have the same effects. They all have that added boost. I would have had Bonds and Clemens in. We'll have to wait and see what happens. They're still hovering around 50, 55%, and they have to wait till next year at least. With that, we'll take our first break on the show. After the break, we're going to talk into some tragic news, the unfortunate deaths of a couple of baseball players in car accidents in the Dominican Republic. Talk about that right after the break at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back into the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. Talking about the Hall of Fame, now we'll transition into talking some more unfortunate news. We had the death last year of Jose Fernandez, the Marlins pitcher, died in that boat accident. There were some drugs and alcohol involved in the incident, so definitely some unfortunate instances, but we have some more unfortunate news within the world of baseball. A couple of guys who lost their lives within the past week in car accidents in the Dominican Republic, in separate accidents. So Andy Marte, he was a third baseman. He last played in 2014 with the Arizona Diamondbacks. He lost his life early Sunday morning in a car accident in the Dominican Republic. He hit .218 for his career, 21 home runs and 99 RBIs. And in the same day, early morning, Yordano Ventura of the Kansas City Royals died in a separate car accident in the Dominican Republic. Ventura was the best pitcher for the Royals, a young guy, only 25 years old. He finishes his career with 38 wins, 31 losses, an ERA of 3.89, and really the best pitcher on a team that won the World Series a couple of years ago. 3 years ago, they lost to the Giants in 7 games. And last year, just did a really bad job of trying to defend their crown. Didn't even make the playoffs. And Ventura was a big part of their reason they had so much success the last few years. He's been their best pitcher. And he unfortunately died in a car accident, as I mentioned, in the Dominican Republic, early hours of Sunday morning. It's definitely really, really sad. I have never been to the Dominican Republic. I do know it is definitely not a fully developed nation, which is unfortunate. I know a lot of times these guys from the Dominican Republic and Cuba, they kind of have to have baseball as an escape to get away from their native land, which is not good. It's unfortunate, but it's great that these guys are getting a whole nother opportunity here in the United States in the MLB to really show off their skills and try to give back to their nation, their family, their homeland, their communities, which aren't as fortunate as what we have seen here in the United States. But when the problem arises is that these countries aren't really developed. I know a lot of the times driving conditions, roads, the people driving aren't necessarily the best. I know that Moises Alou, he said in an interview when talking about this, is when I go on a long trip with my family in the car, if I'm in the Dominican Republic, I pray. It's definitely not safe. It's not a good thing, but you kind of have to do it. He talked about how it's really tricky, but it's the only form of transportation, and that's what you got to do. I've been to Mexico. I went to Mexico last summer. I was in Guadalajara, which is right in the heart of a state called Jalisco. It's basically right in the heart of Mexico, not one of the tourist spots, more in the central part of the cities. Really, really crowded, really compact. A lot of dirt roads. There's not really any white or yellow lines that split up lanes in the road. I saw a car accident, I kid you not, literally every day I was there. So if it's anything like that, which I would assume it's pretty similar, it's definitely not really safe. A lot of people are in a hurry. A lot of people are trying to drive at the same time. So I get how it happens. It's unfortunate. It's not a good thing. I wish it never happened. But that's life for you. That's what happens. It's not a good place. I mean, it's tough, but it's your homeland. It's where your family is. It's your community. It's where the people you grew up with, playing on the streets, playing baseball. It's something you can't not go back to. It's something you can't avoid. So I get it. You know what I mean? It's unfortunate, but it's a part of life. And I mean, it's scary. It's dangerous out there. That's why you really have to take every single moment for granted, because even here, where in the United States, where we're a lot more fortunate, one of the more developed countries in the whole entire world, even strange things like that happen here. Incidents happen. People are dangerous out there on the roads, and it's just a part of life, but it's definitely a bad one. So as I mentioned, Ventura, only 25 years old. He still had his whole life ahead of him. Marte had not played in the MLB since 2014, so I'm sure he could have done some independent stuff. Maybe he could have gone overseas, played in a Dominican league, Chinese league, Korean, Japanese, whatever he wanted to do. So it's unfortunate that both these guys did have to unfortunately die. So my thoughts and prayers goes out to their families and friends. Some of the organizations like the Pirates, the Indians, the Diamondbacks for Marte, and then the Royals, obviously, for Yordano Ventura. They kind of have to go back to the drawing board now. He probably would have been their opening day starter. Definitely a young, bright prospect. Only 25. He had an absolute cannon. He could throw the ball upwards of 100 miles per hour. He was 11-12 last year with a 4.45 ERA. Had 144 strikeouts. I mean, he was a really, really good young player for a team that won the World Series a couple of years back. So that tells you what he meant to their team. He was a great clubhouse guy. Really good friends with Salvador Perez, who's the catcher. Obviously, they have a great relationship behind the plate already anyways. But so, I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's a part of life. So my thoughts and prayers goes out to Marte's family and friends, as well as Ventura's and the Royals. I'm sorry, things happen, but now you have to kind of move on and hope things don't happen again. Hope things don't get worse. We'll take our last break of the show. After the break, we're going to talk about some of the minor deals that have happened within baseball in the past week. Luis Valbuena is going to the Angels, and a former member of the Yankees as well as the Indians, he's got a minor league deal with the Milwaukee Brewers. We'll talk about that and more right after the break here at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
All right, guys, we are in the bottom of the ninth. It's almost time for this game to end. Time to just put it away after one more segment. This is our last segment of the show here. Going to be talking about some minor deals and news within baseball that has occurred within the past week. So as early as yesterday, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, they got a guy who could fill a lot of holes in their lineup. A guy who could play third base, maybe some first base. Albert Pujols is still not healthy. Hopefully he can get healthy enough for the start of the season for the Angels, who are coming off their worst record since 1999. They have the MVP in Mike Trout, who's a stud, by far the best player in baseball. And now they add Luis Valbuena. Luis Valbuena signs with the Angels. It's a 2-year deal worth $15 million. And like I said, he could play third base or he could play first base. Valbuena is 31 years old. He spent the last 2 years with the Houston Astros. Last year, he missed the final 2 months of the season with a hamstring injury, but he hit .260. He had 13 home runs and 40 RBIs. He went on to say, "I feel good because I like that team. I wanted to be here because I've got a good relationship with a couple of the guys on the team." So with Pujols possibly out at the start of the season, Valbuena could definitely be a guy who could fill in at first base, and when Pujols gets healthy, could be a guy who can definitely play third, possibly if they want to use him as maybe some sort of a DH. He's a guy who's got some pop. He's 31, so he's not too old, not definitely in the prime of his career anymore, but a guy who can show some glimpses. He missed the final 2 months of the season, and he had 13 home runs. So if he was healthy, you could have maybe put that number up to 20, RBI-wise, maybe up to 60, maybe 65. Hit .260, so it's not a great average, but it's not terrible. It's a guy who definitely can flash some bat and actually hit some balls. So it's not a bad deal. For a team like the Angels, any deal is a good deal right now because your team is not good. You don't have a great record. You have Mike Trout, who's fantastic. You still have a lot of money on your payroll with Pujols. You finally got rid of Josh Hamilton, which is great for them. Got rid of that whole disaster that happened. But you still need to really make a lot of moves. So that's why any deal right now is a great move. Angels don't really have any pitching. Trying to go with some hitting here. And I think it's a good move. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's a guy who can fill some holes, fill some needs. You got to get a guy like Pujols ready for the start of the season. It looks like he may not be ready to start the season, but maybe a little after. So Valbuena is a guy who can definitely play some first base for them. And a good left-handed bat in their lineup against a lot of right-handed hitting, or right-handed pitching, I should say. So it's a deal that makes a lot of sense to me. Now you switch over to the National League side. The Milwaukee Brewers have added another veteran to their lineup. It's a minor league deal, but obviously you get an invitation to the big league camp. It's a guy who can maybe fill in a lot of experience. It's the former Yankees reliever, and he appeared in 20 games for the Indians last year. Jabba Chamberlain. Jabba Chamberlain had a 2.25 ERA before he was released in July by Cleveland. So not a bad 2.25 ERA. He's only 31, so he's still pretty young. He gives the Milwaukee Brewers another potential piece to add to the back end of its bullpen. We saw Chamberlain really burst onto the scene with the Yankees, a good 7th inning, 8th inning setup man reliever. I'm not really sure what the Brewers have in plan for Jabba, but I think it's a good move. He's definitely an experienced guy, a guy who can add some depth to their bullpen, possibly be a setup man, a closer if need be, if you have some injuries, if you have your starting closer who's maybe needing some rest. It's a good move because the Brewers traded away their closer, Tyler Thornburg, in the offseason to the to the Red Sox, and Jeremy Jeffress, they traded him in the trade deadline to the Rangers. So they need some bullpen help. Jabba Chamberlain can help. It's a minor league deal, so you're not having to give up anything. You know what I mean? It's like a low-risk, high-reward situation, kind of like how Jeremiah and I talked about last week, Josh Hamilton going back to Texas. He had his best years as a member of the Texas Rangers. He goes there as a minor leaguer, a small deal, not a lot of money. Maybe he can resurrect his career. If not, you keep him in the minors. If not, you release him. It's really nothing that you're going to lose out on. This is the exact same thing here with Jabba Chamberlain to Milwaukee. It's a minor league deal. You're not having to give him a lot of money. If he can come in and contribute, we saw last year his ERA was 2.25 in 20 games with Cleveland. So it's not a bad ERA for a bullpen guy. If he can come in and contribute, earn his way onto the roster, he can be a good piece to Milwaukee, who are not a good team. They're trying to obviously get back to some of their glory days a few years back in the NL Central. So they're trying to add any way they can, kind of like the Angels have done with the deal for Valbuena. This makes a whole lot of sense to me. Jabba Chamberlain to Milwaukee, I like it. I'm happy for Jabba. Hopefully he can resurrect his career, get back to some of his early glory days with the Yankees when they were making postseason runs, and then a little bit with Cleveland last year. So it's a good move, and hopefully he can get things done. The LA Dodgers, they found a second baseman because they traded with the Tampa Bay Rays. They traded right-handed pitcher Jose De Leon to Tampa in exchange for second baseman Logan Forsythe. So Logan Forsythe now will probably become their leadoff guy. I would imagine they'd keep Corey Seager in the number 2 spot. You have Justin Turner for 3, Adrian Gonzalez for 4. This just goes on to add even more to this lineup for LA, which is already fantastic. Last year, Forsythe hit .255. He also had 20 home runs, which are a career high. So he is 30 years old. He is kind of up there in age. It looks like the Dodgers were trying to maybe go after Brian Dozier from the Minnesota Twins. Jeremiah and I have talked about that recently. But it kind of fell through. They'd probably have to give up a lot more than what they just did to get Forsythe from Tampa Bay. It seems like guys from Tampa Bay always really contribute, and then they move on. Evan Longoria is still there, but we saw a lot of other guys do the same thing. So I think Forsythe can be a good addition to the Dodgers. Last year they had Chase Utley, he's at the tail end of his career. It's not someone that's going to be there long term. Forsythe can be, at least for the next couple of years. So I like that move in that regard. A good second baseman. That's really the only void they had within their infield, and he can be a leadoff guy. So I think it's a good move. And I didn't really give up much, a good prospect in De Leon. But the Dodgers are definitely looking for right now. They're not looking for building to the future. They already have a young team. They don't need to do that. They need to try and find guys to help them contribute now. I think Logan Forsythe can be a nice addition to that lineup and at second base. And then real quick before we end the show, we're going to be talking about Marlins outfielder and slugger Giancarlo Stanton. So Giancarlo Stanton, he has committed via Instagram as of yesterday that he will be playing in the World Baseball Classic for Team USA. Obviously, Stanton coming off some injuries to end the season last year for Miami. He put on Instagram, boom, I'm coming back to Team USA for the World Baseball Classic. Let's go. The tournament runs from March 6th through March 22nd. The United States are in Group C with one of the favorites, Dominican Republic, Colombia, as well as Canada. And they'll be playing their first-round games at Marlins Park. So obviously, a guy who's familiar with the ballpark, he plays in the major leagues there. So he also has the teammate Christian Yelich, who plays out in the outfield with him. He's playing for Team USA. The last time Giancarlo Stanton had played for Team USA was in the last World Baseball Classic 4 years ago in 2013. He didn't have a great tournament. He only hit .235 with 1 RBI and 17 at-bats. But there's no doubt he can add a whole lot to this lineup, which is already pretty stacked. Last year for Miami, in 119 games, he hit 27 home runs and had 74 RBIs. So it's a great move. Hopefully the United States, with the addition of Stanton, will continue to play well come March. Jeremiah and I will obviously preview the tournament as it creeps a little closer. So probably starting the next couple of weeks, we'll start looking at the groups for each team and kind of predictions and everything. But for me, I guess the only downside is, given his injury issues of the past, do you think the Miami Marlins are really happy about this decision? For me, that's a no. I'm sure they'd love him to rest, get ready for the season. Miami competed last year. They were competing for a wild card spot pretty deep into the season. Obviously, they have a lot of work to do with the death of Fernandez. But Stanton's basically the star of their team now. He's the leader of the franchise now. And hopefully he can stay healthy in the World Baseball Classic, and hopefully he can contribute to Team USA. He's one of the best power hitters in the game, and he's going to be feared every time he steps up on the plate. So as I said, March 6th to March 22nd is the tournament, the U.S. in Group C with the Dominican Republic, Colombia, and Canada. That's going to end the show for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed. My name is Ben Brown. Jeremiah and I will be back in the studio next week to talk all things baseball and more right here at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. Have a good day, have a good week, and we will see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.